Guess the old fool finally learned not to stick his nose where it doesn't belong. My nephew Derek raised his wine glass, smirking at me from across the Thanksgiving table. His wife Karen laughed, that shrill, fake laugh she'd perfected over the years. I sat there with two broken fingers splinted together, my left eye still swollen half shut, a deep gash hidden under my shirt collar. Every breath hurt. My daughter Rachel shot me a worried glance, then forced a smile for the other guests. But I smiled back at Derek, keeping my expression calm despite the fire burning through my injuries. Let him think he'd won. Let him believe I was just a beaten old man who'd learned his place. Because what Derek didn't know was that I hadn't fallen down those basement stairs at all. And I had every piece of evidence I needed to destroy him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back 3 weeks to when this whole nightmare started. My name is Walter Brennan. I'm 67 years old, and I spent 34 years with the FBI, the last 12 as a special agent in charge of the Financial Crimes Unit in Chicago. I've seen every kind of fraud, every type of con artist, every scheme. Desperate people cook up when they think they're smarter than everyone else. I thought I'd seen it all. I thought retirement would be peaceful. Golf on Tuesdays, fishing on the weekends, maybe some woodworking in my garage. My wife, Patricia, had other plans. She wanted to travel, see the world, make up for all those years I'd been buried in case files. We had 2 good years together after I retired. Italy, Greece, a cruise through the Caribbean. Then the stroke took her. Just like that. One morning she was making pancakes. The next she was in the ICU. And 3 days later she was gone. That was 18 months ago. After Patricia passed, my daughter Rachel became my anchor. She was our only child, 42 years old, a pediatrician with a successful practice in Austin. Smart as a whip, compassionate, with her mother's gentle eyes. When she married her husband Tom 15 years ago, I'd been thrilled. Tom was a good man, an architect, steady and reliable. They gave me 2 grandchildren, Emma and Jake, who were the light of my life. But this story isn't about Rachel. It's about my nephew Derek. Derek was my younger brother's son. When my brother Michael died in a car accident 8 years ago, I'd promised to look after Derek. He was 35 then, already showing signs of the man he'd become. Always chasing get-rich-quick schemes, always convinced the next big break was just around the corner. I'd helped him out more times than I could count, paid off credit card debt, co-signed a car loan he eventually defaulted on, gave him seed money for 3 different businesses, all of which failed. But family is family, right? That's what Patricia always said. She had a soft spot for Derek, saw potential in him that I struggled to find. After she died, Derek started coming around more often. At first, I thought he was just checking on me, being a good nephew. He'd stop by on weekends, help with yard work, take me out for dinner. His wife Karen would bring casseroles, ask about my health, my medications, my daily routine. I was grateful for the company. The house felt so empty without Patricia. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. All those questions about my finances, my investments, my estate planning. Derek casually mentioning that he was studying to get his real estate license, that he was learning about elder care and estate management. Karen's sudden interest in my medication schedule, my doctor's appointments, my daily habits. But grief makes you blind. Loneliness makes you stupid. It was early November when Derek called with a proposition. Uncle Walt, I've been thinking. That lake house in Wisconsin, the one you and Aunt Patricia built. You haven't been there since she passed, right? I hadn't. Lake Geneva had been our sanctuary for 25 years. We'd built the house ourselves. Well, hired contractors. But we designed every inch of it. After Patricia died, I couldn't bring myself to go back. Too many memories. The dock where we'd sit watching sunsets. The kitchen where she'd make her famous apple pie. The bedroom where we'd lie awake talking about our dreams for retirement. What about it? I asked. Karen and I were thinking, maybe it would be good for you to go up there. Face those memories, you know? Get some closure. We could drive up together. Spend a long weekend. I'll handle all the logistics. You just relax and heal. Something nagged at me. That old FBI instinct that had saved my life more than once. But I pushed it aside. Derek was family. He was trying to help. When were you thinking? Weekend before Thanksgiving. We could make it a little pre-holiday getaway. Karen's already planning the meals. It'll be great, Uncle Walt. Trust me. Trust me. The two words every con artist learns to say with sincerity. All right, I said. Count me in. I hung up the phone and sat in my empty living room, staring at the photo of Patricia on the mantel. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Maybe it was just paranoia. 34 years of investigating criminals can make you suspicious of everyone. Or maybe it was my gut trying to tell me something my heart didn't want to hear. The Friday of our trip arrived cold and gray. Typical Illinois November weather, the kind that makes your bones ache and your joints protest. I packed warm clothes, my medications, and, on a whim, the backup piece I'd kept from my FBI days. A Glock 19, compact enough to hide, reliable enough to count on. I hadn't fired it in years, but old habits die hard. Derek pulled into my driveway at 2 o'clock sharp, driving a rental SUV instead of his usual beat-up sedan. That struck me as odd. Karen was in the passenger seat, smiling that too bright smile. "Where's your car?" I asked, as I climbed into the back. "In the shop," Derek said, pulling out of the driveway. Transmission problems. The rental was cheaper than fixing it. Another red flag I chose to ignore. We drove north through Wisconsin, the landscape shifting from suburban sprawl to farmland to dense forest. Derek drove fast, too fast for the winding roads, and the SUV fishtailed on patches of black ice. "Easy," I said. "No rush to get there." He didn't slow down. Karen made small talk, asking about my health, my medications, whether I'd updated my will recently. That last question hung in the air a moment too long. "Why do you ask?" "Oh, no reason. Just, at your age, it's important to have everything in order. For Rachel's sake, for the grandkids." "Everything's in order," I said, watching her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. We arrived at the lake house as darkness fell. It looked smaller than I remembered, more isolated. The nearest neighbor was half a mile away through dense woods. No cell service out here either. We'd always relied on the landline for emergencies. The house was freezing. Despite Derek's claims that he'd had the heat turned on remotely, my breath came out in clouds. "Thought you said the heat was on," I said, fumbling for the thermostat. "Must have malfunctioned. These old systems, you know how they are. I'll check the furnace. You get settled." He disappeared into the basement. Karen went to the kitchen to unpack the groceries. I stood in the living room, looking at the photos on the walls. Patricia and me on our wedding day. Rachel as a baby, then a toddler, then a teenager. The last photo we'd taken together, just 6 months before the stroke. "Miss you, sweetheart," I whispered. Something creaked upstairs. I froze, listening. The house was old, prone to settling, but this sound was different, deliberate. I moved quietly up the stairs, my hand instinctively going to my hip where my service weapon used to sit. The bedroom at the end of the hall, our bedroom, had the door slightly ajar. I pushed it open. Derek's duffel bag sat on the bed, partially unzipped. Papers spilled out, mortgage documents, court filings, and something that made my blood run cold. A power of attorney form, with my signature at the bottom. A signature I had never written. I heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly stepped back, closing the door to its original position. By the time Derek reached the top of the stairs, I was in the hallway bathroom, washing my hands. "Furnace is acting up," he said. "Might take a while to warm up." "You okay, Uncle Walt? You look pale. Just tired from the drive." "Think I'll lie down for a bit." "Good idea. Karen's making dinner. We'll call you when it's ready." I went to the guest bedroom, the one furthest from where Derek and Karen would be staying. I locked the door, something I'd never done in this house before. My mind raced. A forged power of attorney. What else had Derek been doing? How deep did this go? I thought about calling Rachel, but my cell phone showed no signal. I'd have to use the landline downstairs, and there was no way to do that without Derek and Karen hearing. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, and did what I'd done thousands of times during investigations. I made a mental list: the forged power of attorney, Derek's sudden interest in the lake house, Karen's questions about my medications, my will, my daily routine, the rental car instead of Derek's own vehicle, the heat that wasn't turned on despite Derek's claims. And now, isolation. No cell service, no neighbors, no witnesses. The pattern was clear. I'd seen it dozens of times in my career. Elder financial abuse. The setup for what would probably be called an accident. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady. 34 years of FBI training doesn't disappear just because you're retired. If Derek thought I was just a helpless old man, he was about to learn how wrong he was. Dinner was tense. Karen had made pot roast, Patricia's recipe, which she must have found in the recipe box in the kitchen. The audacity of it made me sick, but I ate anyway, keeping up the pretense. "So, Uncle Walt," Derek said, refilling my wine glass without asking, "I've been meaning to talk to you about something." Here it comes, I thought. Karen and we're in a bit of a tight spot financially. The market's been rough, and I made some investments that didn't pan out. What kind of investments? Cryptocurrency, mostly, and some real estate deals that went sideways. The point is, we're behind on some payments, and I was hoping, well, maybe you could help us out. How much are we talking? He glanced at Karen, then back at me. About $300,000. I almost laughed. $300,000. Nearly a third of my retirement savings. That's a lot of money, Derek. I know. But it would just be a loan. I'll pay you back with interest once things turn around. I promise. I pretended to consider it. Let me think about it. Sleep on it. We can talk more tomorrow. His jaw tightened, but he forced a smile. Sure, Uncle Walt. Take your time. That night, I didn't sleep. I waited until the house was quiet, then crept downstairs to check the landline. The cord had been cut, cleanly, deliberately, hidden behind the desk where I wouldn't notice it. I checked the doors. The front door lock had been tampered with, the deadbolt removed. The back door was the same. If I tried to leave, they'd know immediately. I was trapped, but not helpless. Never helpless. The next morning, I woke to find Derek already up, drinking coffee in the kitchen. He seemed agitated, checking his phone repeatedly, even though there was no signal. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine. Just waiting on some business stuff." "Hey, I was thinking we could take a walk down to the dock. Check out the lake, see if it froze over yet." The dock, 100 yards from the house, hidden from view by the tree line. Slippery wooden planks over freezing water. If someone were to fall, to hit their head, to slip under the ice, it might be hours before anyone found the body. "My hip's been acting up," I said. "Maybe later." His mask slipped, just for a second. Frustration, maybe anger, then the smile returned. "Sure, no problem. Karen's making breakfast. You hungry? Starving." I played the role of the oblivious old man all morning. Complained about my joints, asked Derek to repeat things because my hearing wasn't what it used to be, fumbled with my reading glasses. Let them think I was weak, confused, an easy target. After breakfast, Derek announced he was driving into town for supplies. "We're low on a few things. You'll be okay here with Karen?" "I've been taking care of myself for 67 years, Derek. I think I can manage a couple hours." The moment his SUV disappeared down the road, I went to work. I searched the house systematically, the way I'd been trained. Derek's duffel bag first. The power of attorney was just the beginning. There were bank statements showing transfers from accounts I didn't recognize into Derek's name. Property documents for the lake house with my signature on a transfer deed. A signature that was close, but not quite right. He must have practiced it dozens of times. Life insurance documents. Mine. A policy I'd taken out 30 years ago, worth $750,000. The beneficiary had been Patricia. After her death, I'd changed it to Rachel. But according to these papers, the beneficiary had been changed 3 months ago to Derek. That was impossible. I'd never signed anything. The full scope of Derek's plan crystallized in my mind. The forged power of attorney gave him control over my finances. The property transfer would give him the lake house. The life insurance change would give him $750,000. All he needed was for me to die. And out here, isolated, with no witnesses, no cell service, no working phone, that could be arranged very easily. A fall on the icy dock, a tumble down the basement stairs, a heart attack brought on by stress, especially if someone had tampered with my medications. I checked my pill bottle. It looked the same, but I didn't trust it. I pocketed the pills I'd brought and disposed of the ones Karen had been so helpfully managing for me. I found Karen in the kitchen, washing dishes. "Need any help?" I asked. "Oh no, Uncle Walt. You just relax. Derek should be back soon." "You know," I said, sitting at the kitchen table, "I've been thinking about Derek's proposition, the loan." Her hands stilled in the soapy water. "Have you? I want to help. I really do. But I need to understand the full picture. What exactly is the money for?" She turned, drying her hands on a towel. Her eyes were calculating, assessing. "Derek didn't want to worry you with the details, but we're behind on the mortgage. 3 months, and there are some credit card debts. And, well, Derek made some bad bets. Gambling?" She hesitated, then nodded. "It's been a problem. He's been trying to stop, but the debts keep piling up. The people he owes money to, they're not patient, Uncle Walt. They've been making threats." "What kind of threats?" "The kind that make me scared to answer the door." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the forged documents, the cut phone line, the tampered locks. Karen wasn't a victim here. She was a co-conspirator. "I see," I said. "Well, let me think about it some more. Family helps family, right?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Right." Derek returned an hour later with groceries and a barely concealed agitation. He'd made some calls in town, I guessed, probably to whoever was pressuring him for money. The walls were closing in on him, and desperate people do desperate things. "Uncle Walt," he said, setting down the bags, "how about that walk now? The weather's cleared up." "Actually, I was hoping to check on the basement. Heard some strange noises last night. Might be an animal got in." His eye twitched, just slightly, but I caught it. "I'll check it for you. You shouldn't be going down those stairs with your hip." "Nonsense. I built this house. I know every inch of it. Besides, I've been cooped up all morning. I need to move around." I headed for the basement door before he could protest. The stairs were old, wooden, steep. As I descended, I kept my hand on the railing and my weight on the outside edges of each step where the wood was strongest. Halfway down, I found it. The 5th step from the bottom had been sawed partially through, the cut hidden in the shadow of the stair above it. One good step in the center, and it would give way. At the bottom, a concrete floor waited. A fall from this height, onto that surface, would break bones. Possibly a neck. Probably fatal for a 67-year-old man. I carefully stepped over the damaged stair and continued to the bottom. Behind me, I heard Derek on the stairs. "Find anything?" "Just checking the water heater," I said, keeping my voice casual. "Seems fine, but that 5th step is rotted through. Almost went right through it. We'll need to be careful." His expression didn't change. "That's dangerous. I'll take a look at it in the morning, see if we can fix it." He was good, really good. But I'd interrogated hundreds of suspects over 3 decades. I knew a liar when I saw one. That night, I took precautions. I wedged a chair under my bedroom door, kept my Glock within reach, and didn't take any of the medications Karen had offered. I slept in short intervals, waking at every sound. Around 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps outside my door. Someone tried the handle, found it blocked, and retreated. They were getting impatient. Whatever deadline Derek was facing, it must be close. The next morning, Sunday, Derek's demeanor had changed. The friendly mask was slipping, replaced by something harder, more desperate. "I need an answer about the money, Uncle Walt. I've been patient, but I can't wait any longer." "What's the rush? I told you, time-sensitive opportunity. It won't wait, neither will my due diligence. I spent 34 years investigating financial crimes, Derek. I don't write large checks without understanding exactly where the money's going. His jaw clenched. You don't trust me. I trust verified information. Get me documentation on this investment. Bank statements, business plans, projections. Then we'll talk. There isn't time for that. Then I guess there isn't time for my money. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Derek stood slowly, his hands curling into fists. You know what your problem is, Uncle Walt? You think you're still some big-shot FBI agent. But you're not. You're just a lonely old man who's going to die in this house with nobody to remember him. Derek, shut up. I'm done playing nice. I've spent the last year setting this up. The power of attorney, the property transfer, the insurance policy. Everything's in place. All I need is for you to have a little accident, and all your assets become mine. You forged my signature. It wasn't hard. You leave documents lying around everywhere. Old birthday cards, Christmas letters, plenty of samples to practice with. Karen appeared in the doorway, her face pale but determined. Derek, maybe we should just... We're past the point of backing out, Karen. You know what happens if we don't pay Vincenzo by Tuesday? You want to explain to your mother why you don't have any kneecaps? I filed that name away. Vincenzo. Probably a loan shark, maybe organized crime. Derek wasn't just in financial trouble. He was in danger, and he decided that my life was worth less than his own survival. So what's the plan? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Push me down the stairs? Drown me in the lake? Derek laughed, but there was no humor in it. Originally? Yeah, the stairs were going to do it. A tragic fall. Elderly man loses his footing. But you had to go and notice the step, didn't you? Always so observant. So now we're going to do this the hard way. He moved toward me, and I stood, positioning myself near the fireplace where a heavy iron poker rested in its stand. Think carefully, Derek. You're talking about murder, federal crime when it involves financial fraud across state lines. And I spent 3 decades putting people like you in prison. You're not going to put anyone in prison, old man. You're going to have a heart attack. Stress of being at the lake house for the first time since Patricia died. Karen saw you take your pills wrong, mixed up the dosages. Tragic, but understandable. No one will question it. He lunged. I grabbed the poker and swung, catching him across the forearm. He howled and stumbled back, but recovered quickly. He was younger, stronger, faster. But I was experienced. He came at me again, and I sidestepped, using his momentum to send him crashing into the bookshelf. Books rained down around him. Karen screamed. I moved toward the back door, but she blocked my path, a kitchen knife in her hand. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, she said. Her hand was shaking, but the blade was steady enough to be dangerous. You're both going to prison, I said. Even if you kill me, the evidence will come out. I've already made arrangements. A bluff, but a good one. Derek picked himself up from the floor, his face twisted with rage. What arrangements? I sent copies of everything to my daughter. The forged power of attorney, the property transfer, the insurance changes, all of it. With instructions to open if anything happens to me. It wasn't true. I hadn't had a chance to send anything. But they didn't know that. Derek and Karen exchanged glances. For a moment, I thought my bluff had worked. Then Derek smiled. That cold, predatory smile I'd seen on dozens of criminals over the years. Nice try, Uncle Walt. But we checked your email before we came up here. Nothing sent. And Rachel hasn't heard from you in 3 days. She thinks you're having a nice time at the lake. He rushed me again. This time, I wasn't fast enough. He tackled me to the ground, and I felt something crack in my ribs. The poker went flying. I fought back. But 67 years don't compete well with 39. He got his hands around my throat, and I felt the pressure building, the darkness creeping in at the edges of my vision. Karen was saying something, but I couldn't hear her. All I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears, the rasp of my own breathing growing weaker. This was it. This was how I'd die. Murdered by my own nephew in the house I'd built with my wife. But then I remembered. The Glock. It was upstairs, in my bedroom, useless. But there was something else. Patricia's gun. A Smith & Wesson. .38 special she'd insisted on keeping in the kitchen drawer, hidden behind the dish towels. A woman alone in the woods needs protection, she'd always said. I bucked my hips, throwing Derek off balance. My knee came up hard into his groin. He gasped and released his grip. I rolled away, wheezing, and scrambled toward the kitchen. Karen was in my path. She slashed with the knife, and I felt it bite into my arm, but I didn't stop. I shoved her aside, yanked open the drawer, and my hand closed around the familiar grip of the .38. I spun around just as Derek reached me, and he froze, staring down the barrel. "Back off," I wheezed, my throat raw. "Now." He raised his hands, but his eyes were calculating. "You won't shoot me, Uncle Walt. You're a by-the-book agent. Always followed the rules." I retired. Rules don't apply anymore. And you'd be amazed what a man will do to survive. I gestured toward the living room. "Move. Slowly." Karen, drop the knife. They complied. I directed them to the 2 chairs by the fireplace, keeping the gun trained on both of them. My hands were steady despite the pain in my ribs, my arm, my throat. "Sit." Hands on the armrests. Using duct tape from the junk drawer, I secured their wrists and ankles to the chairs. Not professional restraints, but they'd hold long enough. "You can't keep us here," Derek said, his voice tight with fury. "Someone will come looking. Not likely. You told Rachel we were having a nice uncle-nephew bonding weekend. No one's expecting to hear from us until tomorrow night at the earliest. And by then, the state police will be here." His face went pale. "I managed to get a signal when you went into town yesterday." I lied again. "Sent some texts to an old friend at the bureau. He's probably already on his way." Derek's mask crumbled completely. "Please, Uncle Walt." I was desperate. The people I owe money to, they would have killed me. Killed Karen. I didn't know what else to do. So you decided to kill me instead. I didn't want to hurt you. I just needed the money. The insurance, the property, it would have been enough to pay everyone off and start over. I was going to take care of Rachel. I swear. She would have gotten most of it eventually. You would have bankrupted your own family to save yourself. He had nothing to say to that, because we both knew it was true. The night stretched on, cold and silent. I didn't dare leave them to get firewood or check on the road. So we sat there, captor and captives, waiting for morning. Around midnight, Derek started talking. Confessing, really. The gambling had started small, he said. A few bets on football games, some online poker, but he'd gotten in over his head. Started borrowing from the wrong people. When the debts spiraled out of control, he'd seen my life insurance policy and had an idea. It was supposed to be quick, he said. Painless. The stairs, a broken neck. It would have been over in seconds. Better than what Vincenzo would do to me if I didn't pay. You think that makes it better? I think desperation makes people do things they never thought possible. I looked at him. This man I'd tried to help for years. This nephew I'd promised my dying brother I'd look after. I would have helped you, Derek, if you'd just asked. Not with gambling debts, but with getting treatment. Getting your life back on track. That's what family does. We're not family, he spat. You made sure I knew that. Always looking down on me, comparing me to Rachel, wondering why I couldn't get my life together like she did. Maybe there was truth in that. Maybe I hadn't been as supportive as I should have been. But it didn't excuse attempted murder. Dawn came slowly, gray and cold. Around 8 o'clock, I heard a vehicle on the road. My heart pounded as headlights flashed through the windows. A car pulled up outside. I raised the gun, ready for anything. The door opened, and Rachel walked in. She took in the scene in an instant. Me, bruised and bleeding, holding a gun. Derek and Karen duct taped to chairs. Her face went white. Dad? What happened? What did you do? Not what I did, sweetheart. What they tried to do. I told her everything. The forged documents, the sawed step, the attack. With each word, I watched her expression shift from confusion to horror to something that looked like grief. When I finished, she turned to Derek, her cousin, the boy she'd grown up with, played with at family reunions, defended when others called him a screw-up. Is it true? Derek couldn't meet her eyes. Rachel, I can explain. Is it true? I was desperate. I didn't have a choice. She stood there for a long moment, perfectly still. Then she pulled out her phone. I'm calling 911. We got signal about a mile back down the road. The landline's cut, I said. We'll need to drive out. Rachel looked at Derek one last time, and I watched her heart break in real time. Then something hardened in her face, and she became someone I'd never seen before. Let's go, Dad. They can wait for the police here. Rachel, Derek pleaded. We can work this out. It doesn't have to be like this. Yes, she said quietly. It does. We drove 20 minutes until we had cell service, then called 911. 2 hours later, the Wisconsin State Police arrived at the lake house. They arrested Derek and Karen on charges of attempted murder, fraud, forgery, and assault. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged documents, the sawed step, my injuries, all of it painted a clear picture. Which brings me back to the Thanksgiving table. 3 weeks after that nightmare weekend, my broken fingers were still splinted, my eye still swollen, the gash on my arm still healing, but I'd insisted on hosting the family dinner. Rachel needed normalcy after everything she'd been through. Derek and Karen, somehow, were out on bail. Their lawyer had convinced the judge they weren't flight risks, not with all their assets frozen and their passports confiscated. And somehow, Derek had convinced Rachel to let them come to Thanksgiving. For closure, she'd said. I need to face him. Need to understand how I missed all the signs. I'd argued against it, but she was my daughter, and she was hurting. So I'd agreed. Now, sitting at my dinner table with my injuries screaming, I watched Derek play the victim. It was all a misunderstanding, he was saying to my sister-in-law, Martha. Uncle Walt got confused. Thought he saw things that weren't there. The dementia's starting, you know. Sad, really. Martha looked uncomfortable. My nephew's wife, Karen, nodded along, backing up every lie. So, Uncle Walt, Derek said, that smug grin spreading across his face. Now that you've had some time to think clearly, you realize this was all just a big mix-up, right? When are you going to drop those ridiculous charges? We're family, after all. The table went silent. Everyone stared at me. I carefully set down my fork, the movement sending pain through my broken fingers. I looked Derek directly in the eye. A mix-up. Is that what you're calling attempted murder now? Dad, Rachel started, but I held up my hand. No, sweetheart. Let me say this. I turned back to Derek. You spent 6 months forging my signature on financial documents. You changed the beneficiary on my life insurance policy from my daughter to yourself. You created a fraudulent power of attorney giving yourself control over my assets. You transferred the deed to my lake house into your name without my knowledge or consent. You sawed through the basement stairs, planning for me to fall and break my neck. You cut the landline so I couldn't call for help. And when none of that worked fast enough, you put your hands around my throat and tried to strangle me to death in my own home. The room was deathly silent. Martha's face had gone pale. Her husband Richard looked like he wanted to disappear. Derek's mask was cracking, revealing the fury beneath. You can't prove the Wisconsin State Police have photos, documents, and your fingerprints on the saw. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit is investigating the forged signatures. And I have these. I carefully held up my splinted hand, then pulled aside my collar to show the healing gash on my neck. Defensive wounds, documented by 3 different doctors, along with the ligature marks on my throat where you tried to choke me to death. I lowered my hand and leaned forward, ignoring the pain. You didn't teach me a lesson about being old, Derek. You didn't prove I was weak or senile or in your way. You proved something else entirely. What's that? His voice was tight, controlled, but I could see the fear in his eyes now. That you're a coward who tried to murder an elderly relative for insurance money, and you still failed. Because I spent 34 years putting criminals behind bars, and I wasn't about to let a pathetic, desperate gambler be the one to take me down. The silence that followed was absolute. Martha was crying quietly. Richard had pushed back from the table like he wanted to run. Karen was staring at her plate, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Derek stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is ridiculous. I don't have to sit here and be insulted. Karen, we're leaving. But Karen didn't move. She was looking at Derek with an expression I recognized from hundreds of interrogations. The look of someone who'd finally realized they'd hitched their wagon to the wrong horse. "Karen," Derek said again, his voice rising. "We're leaving." "No," she said quietly. "I'm not going anywhere with you." "What?" "My lawyer called yesterday. I'm cooperating with the prosecution. In exchange for testifying against you, they're dropping most of the charges against me." Derek's face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Shock, betrayal, rage, and finally, fear. "You can't do that. We had a plan. We were in this together." "The plan failed, Derek, and I'm not spending 20 years in prison for you." She finally looked up, meeting his eyes. "I never wanted to hurt anyone. You told me it would be simple, quick, that he wouldn't suffer. But you enjoyed it, didn't you? When you had your hands around his throat, I saw your face. You liked it." Derek lunged toward her, but Richard was faster. "My sister-in-law's husband might be an accountant, but he'd played college football 20 years ago." He caught Derek in a tackle that sent them both crashing into the sideboard. Dishes shattered, wine spilled across the tablecloth like blood. By the time I got there, Richard had Derek pinned to the ground. "Someone call the police," Richard said, breathing hard. "Pretty sure this violates his bail conditions." Rachel was already on the phone. 20 minutes later, 2 squad cars were in my driveway. They arrested Derek on the spot for violating the terms of his bail. As they let him out in handcuffs, he turned back to look at me. "This isn't over, Uncle Walt. I'll get out. I'll appeal. I'll fight this." I walked up to him slowly, my broken fingers throbbing, my neck still marked with the bruises from his hands. "No, Derek, you won't. The federal prosecutor called me yesterday. With Karen's testimony, they're adding charges. Wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy to commit murder. You're looking at 25 to 30 years in federal prison. No parole in the federal system. You'll be my age when you get out, assuming you survive that long." His face crumpled. For a moment, I saw the boy I'd bounced on my knee 30 years ago, the nephew I'd taken to baseball games, the young man I'd tried so hard to help. But that boy was gone, replaced by something desperate and cruel. "I made a promise to your father," I said quietly. "When Michael died, I promised I'd look after you. I failed him. I failed you. But I'm not going to let you destroy anyone else." They put him in the back of the squad car. Karen went voluntarily, riding in the second car to the station to give her statement. As the lights disappeared down the street, I felt Rachel's hand slip into mine. We went back inside to survey the damage. The sideboard was ruined, dishes broken everywhere. Wine stains spread across the carpet like bruises. Martha and Richard were cleaning up, apologizing repeatedly as if it were their fault. "Leave it," I said. "It's just stuff. Stuff can be replaced." We salvaged what we could of the meal and ate quietly, the tension gradually releasing. When it was over and the guests had gone home, Rachel stayed behind. We sat in the living room, the fireplace crackling, not speaking, just being together. "He really would have killed you," she finally said. "It wasn't a question. Yes. And you survived because of everything you learned at the FBI. Partly, but mostly I survived because I'm too stubborn to die at the hands of someone like Derek." That got a small, sad smile from her. "Mom would be proud. Your mother would have shot him the moment he walked in the door. She never trusted him. I should have listened to her." Rachel leaned her head on my shoulder, careful of my injuries. "What happens now?" "Now, Derek goes to trial. Karen testifies. The evidence speaks for itself. And then, hopefully, we move on." "Can we? Move on? I thought about it. The lake house was already on the market. Too many bad memories now, layered over the good ones with Patricia. The money would go into a trust for Rachel and the grandkids. My own finances were a mess, tangled up in the fraud investigation, but they'd sort themselves out eventually. "We can try," I said. "That's all anyone can do." Derek's trial was scheduled for February. His lawyer tried for a plea deal, but the federal prosecutor wasn't interested. With Karen's testimony and the overwhelming physical evidence, they were confident of a conviction. I'd have to testify, relive those hours of terror on the witness stand, but I'd done it before. I could do it again. In the meantime, I started volunteering at the local senior center. Self-defense classes for older adults. Awareness training about financial fraud. How to spot the warning signs when someone is trying to take advantage of you. If my experience could help even one person avoid what happened to me, then maybe something good came out of that terrible weekend. Rachel called every day, sometimes twice. She was in therapy, working through the guilt of not seeing Derek's true nature, the betrayal of trusting him with our family. I kept telling her the same thing. She didn't do this. Derek did. She was a victim here too. My grandkids came to visit every weekend, bringing light and noise and chaos back into my quiet house. Emma, 12, had decided she wanted to be an FBI agent when she grew up. Jake, 9, just wanted to know if I'd really tackled a bad guy with a fireplace poker. Sort of, I told him. It was more like I hit him with it. Cool. Some nights, late and quiet, I thought about those moments on the living room floor. Derek's hands around my throat, the darkness closing in. How close I'd come to never seeing another sunrise. Never holding my grandchildren again. Never watching Rachel rebuild her life after this betrayal. And then I thought about Patricia, her voice in my head, that no-nonsense tone she'd always used when I was overthinking things. You're still here, Walt. Stop dwelling and start living. So that's what I'm doing. Living one day at a time. My fingers healed crooked, and they ache when it rains. The gash on my neck left a scar that I'll carry forever. But I'm still here, still fighting, still refusing to let anyone else write my ending. Derek thought he could get away with murder. Instead, he's facing a quarter-century in federal prison, a criminal record that will follow him forever, and the knowledge that he tried to kill an old man and failed completely. His wife turned against him. His family disowned him. His name will be synonymous with betrayal and cowardice for the rest of his miserable life. That's justice. American justice. Sometimes slow, often complicated, but ultimately certain. And for me, I got something more valuable than revenge. I got my life back. My daughter's trust. My grandchildren's admiration. And the satisfaction of knowing that experience, training, and 34 years of catching criminals don't disappear just because you retire. Derek learned that lesson the hard way. And when he raised his glass at Thanksgiving and called me a fool who'd learned his lesson, he was right about one thing. Someone did learn a lesson at that lake house. It just wasn't me. It was him. And he'll have 25 years in a federal penitentiary to remember it. If you're listening to this and you're in a similar situation, if someone in your family is asking too many questions about your finances, pressuring you to sign documents you don't understand, isolating you from the people who love you, trust your instincts. You're not paranoid, you're not crazy, and you're not too old to fight back. Get help. Tell someone. Document everything. Because the Dereks of this world count on our silence, our trust, our reluctance to believe that family could betray us so completely. Don't give them that power. As for me, I'm heading back to the senior center tomorrow. Got a new class starting. 12 people who want to learn how to protect themselves. Never be a victim, I tell them at the start of every session. Stay aware, stay strong, trust your instincts, and never, ever underestimate what an old agent knows about catching criminals. They laugh when I say that last part, but then I show them the scars, and the laughter stops. This is real. It happens every day to people who never see it coming. I saw it coming just in time, and that made all the difference. So yeah, Derek, the old fool, learned his lesson. And now, thanks to your greed and stupidity, so did you. Enjoy federal prison. I hear the food's terrible,